So welcome, Fiona and Robert. Welcome everybody who's here with us today. It's a great pleasure to have you. So Fiona and Rob are from the Dublin City University, also a partner within the UCIU. So we work quite closely together. Fiona is an academic developer in the Dublin City University teaching enhancement unit. And Rob is a learning technologist in teaching in the same unit and is devoted to enhance teaching, learning, and assessment practices on the teachers' modules with digital technologies. So I guess I can say you're learning designers. Can I say that? You are both learning designers at DCU's Center for Teaching and Learning. So welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and everyone. I'm going to kick off today's presentation. It's wonderful to be invited to speak here today. Thank you so much for thinking of us, and we're delighted to share our story with you all today. It would be even nicer if we were in Portugal with you all, but it's a lovely sunny day in Dublin, so it feels like Portugal here. Let me share my slides with you all first, and I think you should all be able to see that. And
we do.
Great. And what I'm also just going to do is I'm just going to put a link to the slides in the chat. You might want to follow along yourselves with that link, or you might want to look at the slides later as well, but you can access it there in the chat. So as Sandra said, my name is Rob. I'm a learning technologist, and my colleague Fiona is an academic developer in the Teaching Enhancement Unit. And we perform various roles. We do learning design. We support the scholarship of teaching and learning. We sometimes provide counselling and inspiration and creativity to staff in the university. So it's a wonderful role to be in and a wonderful team to be in. And we're here today to tell you about one of our projects that we've been working on, Students as Partners in Assessment, or SaPiA for short. A little bit about DCU before we begin. We are a relatively young university in Irish terms, at least. We celebrated our 40th year last year. As Sandra said, we're a member of ECIU, we're a member of Yearn, Athena Swan. We have a strategic partnership with Future Learn and a partnership with Advanced HE. We're part of the Irish Universities Association, and through them we have a link to the European Universities Association. So even though we're a young university, we do try and make connections and network as much as possible so that we can disseminate good practice. We're situated, our campuses are situated primarily in North Dublin City, Dublin being the capital of Ireland on the east coast of the country. We have about 18,000 students, and that includes undergraduate, postgraduate students, part-time students, distance learning online students. Although, of course, with the pandemic, almost all of our students have been distance online students. And we have about 2,000 staff, full-time staff, part-time staff, support staff, and so on. When I use the term staff, I mean that to include teaching staff like professors and lecturers, professional support staff like myself and Fiona, and other types of staff as well. You can see we've 5 major faculties in the university spanning a number of disciplines. We are Ireland's only faculty of education, where we train educators from early childhood all the way up to higher education level. We've some very practical and applied programs, in particular in engineering, computing, science, health, business, etc. And we also have a relatively new humanities faculty. And then myself and Fiona, we work in the Teaching Enhancement Unit, which is the university's Centre for Teaching and Learning, which will be familiar to most of you people. I imagine most of you come from that kind of a background, and actually it'll be interesting. I can see some of you are saying hello in the chat, but it would be great if you could in the chat let me know the kind of roles that you inhabit. Are you professors? Are you lecturers? Are you academic developers, etc.? It would be great to get a sense of that from you all here today. And largely our role in the Teaching Enhancement Unit is very broadly to support academic staff, again, be it part-time, lecturers or full-time academics or tenured professors, support them to develop their teaching excellence, whatever that looks like in their particular discipline and in their particular contexts. And we do that through a variety of ways. We provide lots of different types of professional development to the teaching staff, sometimes in the form of maybe accredited modules or suites of workshops, seminars, communities of learning, strategic projects, and then more targeted projects, such as the one we're going to talk about today, SaPiA. And really, we try and engage with our teaching staff in a variety of ways to sort of influence them and nudge them forward to develop their teaching practice. We are also responsible for the institution's ecosystem of learning technologies. And that's something that I have a particular interest in myself. We use the Moodle platform is at the heart of our ecosystem. We also use Zoom. We use the Mahara portfolio platform for supporting reflection and so on. And we have a variety of other tools as well. And as you'll discover later on in this presentation, technology really was key to what we did in this SaPiA project. Before I go on to start talking about SaPiA, I'd actually like to do a little activity with you all, if you'd all be so kind, because I want to find out, or Fiona and I want to find out from you, what you think a student partnership in assessment means. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to put another link in the chat if you want to click on the link now. The link to a Vivox poll. So Vivox is another one of our learning technologies in DCU, and we're going to use that now to get your opinion on things. So if you want to click the link in the chat there, it'll open up a web page on your computer, and you should just see, I think, a welcome screen at the moment. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open a poll. So when you click on that link and when you get brought to that web page, you should now see an option on screen for you to type in a response. And I can see there's 35 of you who have clicked in on the link. So if there's any more of you out there, please do click on the link in the chat to get to the Vivox activity. And the question is just very simply, do you know what student partnership in assessment looks like? And if you do, could you maybe share an example with us? Now, it doesn't have to be very long. You might just enter one or two keywords, one or two main words. But what we want to do here is just try and get a sense from everyone here at the session what your understanding is of student partnership in assessment. And I can see lots of you are entering responses, so thank you very much. I'll give you all another minute or so to do that. I know sometimes these terms can be thrown around and people aren't always sure what they mean. And actually, when Fiona picks up now in a minute, she'll sort of reveal one of the things that we discovered, which is that so many of these terms are interrelated, and they really just all, at the end of the day, come back to good teaching and learning approaches. That's fair to say. This will be a good activity just to try and ascertain what people's conceptions are at this point. So I might just give another 10 seconds. 9, I won't attempt to count in Portuguese. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, thank you so much. We got about 25 responses there, and let's have a look on screen now. So if you come back to the Zoom meeting, let's take a look at and see what people are saying. So discussion of the teacher assessment proposal. Yeah, very good. Discussing the assessment. I see here's a peer assessment is coming here strong. Very good. Excellent. Students having an active role in their own assessment, not just passive test makers. Very much so. Some to do with group assignments. Group assignments could possibly be a form of partnership. Absolutely, they could be. Yeah, some people saying they don't know, not really. That's absolutely fine. Hopefully by the end of this session, you might understand a bit more about it. Developing their own assessment questions. That's a great form of partnership. And we're going to be talking about one of our case studies of that shortly. Self-assessment, sharing responsibility, excellent. Participating in the design, designing rubrics, very good. Yeah, this is really very much aligning to what we found in our work. Any thoughts on that, Fiona?
Just I guess that we can go home now. They've covered a lot of it. No, I'm really joking. I guess what comes to my mind when I look at some of these inputs is that we sometimes, I suppose, complicate matters in assessment, and certainly in partnering students in assessment. And the aim of our work really was to demystify students as partners in assessment with our academics. And we, I think, succeeded doing that in some way by, I suppose, allowing the academics to clearly see in relation to best practice or evidence-based practice that they're already engaging in some of this wonderful practice, but they're just not calling it out with their students. So yeah, we'll with more of that on anyway.
Excellent. Thanks very much. If you want to leave the Vox on your computer as it is, at the end, we're going to do another question at the end. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass over to Fiona, who's going to share her screen now and continue.
Super. And can you see that? Oh, not in present mode, am I?
Oh yeah, if you just want to click present, Fiona.
Present. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rob, for that. And it's good to be here with you all. What I'm going to do, with your permission, is to begin by giving you some background and context to the work that we're doing. And it starts with, and I'm sorry now, here I can see it, yeah, the chat box. I'm going to pop in here a link to some work that a project we were involved in over a number of years. From 2016 to 2020, we worked as one of 4 European partners on an Erasmus Plus project, and the other partners were Roehampton University in London, the University of Vienna, and WIEN Brienne University in Germany. And then the project was led by Ilia University in Georgia on behalf of all of the higher education institutes in Georgia. So it was a massive project and finished last October. And our role as part of this collaboration, our role in the Teaching Enhancement Unit in DCU was to develop a resource toolkit for academics to support them designing assessments to actively encourage academic integrity. And the suite of resources advanced in this toolkit includes a literature review, publication, a set of 12 principles that support academics designing assessments to promote academic integrity, and some related explanations on the back of that resource, an associated interactive glossary, self and team checklists, animated scenarios that were designed deliberately to provoke discussion, so they're probably poor examples of academic integrity, and then a small collection of case studies. And all of these resources can be accessed under Creative Commons license at teuintegrityproject.wordpress.com. So all one word, TEU Integrity Project. So that was the sort of the starting point. And following internal and external review and feedback, the principles were finalized and then presented as 3 overlapping categories for application. The first category of these principles, 4 principles, and that are 3 principles, and they related to standards. And this sort of encouraged us all in the university to think about a kind of a university-wide approach and responsibility to promoting academic integrity. Design offers 5 principles around how best to design assessments to promote academic integrity. And then thirdly, students as partners, which overlaps with the design theme, but we called it out deliberately because there was quite a lot in the literature and a lot of interest around students being partners in assessment and how this can promote academic integrity. We were particularly interested in exploring this in more detail, particularly partnership in assessment, because of this link to promoting academic integrity. And as a result, we secured some internal funding and used this then to conduct a scoping review and develop a resource which could then be used to stimulate conversations around how best to partner students in assessment. And it's this that we want to talk to you about today. So that's the second point there in this diagram, the scoping review. Most of the work we conduct in the Teaching Enhancement Unit starts with a scoping review. So we can kind of get, I suppose, a baseline or a kind of a position to start our work and development of workshops and resources. So once we developed the SaPiA resource, so that's what we call it, SaPiA Students as Partners in Assessment, we workshopped it, and we workshopped it with the underpinning literature review to help raise awareness in DCU on how best to partner students in assessment. And we were very interested, but not surprised, to find that many of our academics were already engaging in much of this best practice. But as I said a few minutes ago, they weren't calling it out specifically with their students or indeed identifying with it themselves as a partnership approach. So when we workshopped the resource that we'll introduce to you now in a moment, we did so with a view to recruiting people to kind of engage in a pilot. So you can see that's number 4, the pilots. So we have 11 modules with 8 different academics piloting this resource. And today we want to share some of those examples with you. Rob will do that later on and share some of the findings with you. So that's currently where we are now. We're disseminating our work and seeking feedback and input from colleagues like yourselves, both nationally and internationally. And as Rob said earlier, we're delighted and grateful for the opportunity today to share our work with you. And I would particularly like to thank Sandra for the invitation. So moving on then, the literature review then, the scoping review, this is the first part, as I said, of the project and is the first part of many projects we engage in. And we were conscious, as all of us were, of a paradigm shift and the ever-present competing assessment discourses. So we wanted to focus our attention primarily on assessment partnership with students in assessment specifically, as distinct from wider areas of student partnership. So as I said already, that our work on the Integrity Project showed us that there is growing recognition that in order for students' learning and assessment experience to be successful, they should have a sense of agency and investment in the process. And this agency is crucial to promoting high levels of student engagement. So for the SaPiA scoping review, we conducted it last year, March to May 2020, and we followed a scoping search using relevant databases. We selected this process because it enabled relatively swift coverage of a field like students as partners in assessment, but does not require, I suppose, quality assessment of each article selected. Now, obviously, the 3 of us, the 3 authors, engaged deeply in kind of reviewing each of the articles, but not a kind of a systematic analysis, and nor does it require a sort of a synthesis of results. And Darsky and O'Malley observed that this approach to scoping studies provides a narrative or a descriptive account of the available research. And this is what we wanted to do in this context. We use the PICO model, which we use to frame the purpose of the literature scoping exercise. This is an approach used by evidence-based medicine research as a specialized framework to help formulate and facilitate literature searches. So you can see we include the population there, which are educators in higher education. The intervention we were seeking to explore was students as partners in assessment. We used for comparison evidence of examples of partnership approaches. And we did this so that we could help support and empower academics to make partnership in assessment explicit and call it out with students. On the right-hand side of this slide, then, we just wanted to draw your attention to some of the broader contextual issues in relation to this scoping review. And it's important to, I suppose, explain to you why we included these. There was a context in existence before we started to engage in the literature. As I mentioned already, the Integrity Project formed part of this context, but other background contexts included quality, because, as I mentioned, we received internal funding from the President's Office under a fund that supported quality enhancement initiatives. So we addressed this in the scoping review in the context using the work of the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education in Ireland and the work of the National Student Engagement Programme. So they had already conducted quite a bit of research in this area, and we drew on that very valuable work and sort of expanded it with our review of the broader literature. And finally, in terms of context, we in the Teaching Enhancement Unit in DCU, like many of you, I'm sure, have a very keen interest in inclusive practices and recognise that the role of partnering students in universal design for learning is best practice. And so that's presented as part of the context. So this is the literature review that we conducted. You can access it through those slides that Rob shared the link with you, because it's linked directly into the review, the scoping review here. And so you can see here that this is the kind of context. So the rationale, here's our methodology that I've just outlined to you. And now what we're going to talk to you about are these three core themes. So, as I said, the scope and review presents a clear rationale and impetus for partnering students in assessment. And again, just to recognise, and the review recognises that academics are already engaging in this kind of practice, but perhaps not making it explicit. The scope and review presents evidence-based practice examples of how these partnerships can perhaps be made more operational, and indeed in what context they might be more suitable. So firstly, the role of self and peer assessment in developing a shared assessment literacy and in improving student productivity and performance is discussed, as well as how technology can support this. The benefits of peer and self-assessment are long espoused and prolific in the literature, so that's not anything new for us. However, what's important in terms of student performance and efficacy is an integrated and scaffolded approach to self and peer assessment. So it can't be just sort of one piece of the assessment. It has to be an integrated part of the assessment if it's to work successfully in terms of partnering students. And this review presents many examples of how this can happen, and particularly shows how technology can leverage and enhance this structured approach. So the second theme was the second theme in terms of involving students as partners in the assessment process. And one of you, or some of you mentioned it already in the VVox poll, is by including them in the development of assessment activities and/or assessment criteria. And the literature shows how this can increase ownership and decrease anxiety with the students, whilst streamlining summative assessment processes and enhancing the formative assessment element for students. And this approach of kind of co-designing assessments and co-designing rubrics can be applied in multiple contexts. And again, there's lots of evidence of that in the literature, and we'll touch on some examples later on. The final theme explored in the literature was collaborative grading. And this was found to have many benefits. Again, the strongest of which was the development of shared assessment literacy between both students and academics. And this shared assessment literacy between students and academics came through when we spoke with students and when we were developing the resource. So it's not just that we as academics would like our students to share our assessment literacy, our understanding of assessment literacy. It's equally important that we understand the students' understanding of assessment literacy. And collaborative grading can help with this, but it does present challenges as well and requires, like any of these partnership approaches, careful preparation and support. Participation can be daunting, particularly for students who are less confident in articulating themselves and perhaps who are in an earlier stage of their learning journey. Workplace supervisors might experience anxiety for the added responsibility of formally grading work, and also that the students fear perhaps that the students' performance might reflect badly on them. So consequently, it's important to ensure all participants in collaborative grading are empowered to participate. And empowerment happens through support and training and resources being available, and also a transparent process. So there, a kind of a whistle-stop tour of the three core themes that emerged in our literature review. We then were conscious that the review validated a lot of what we already knew and gave us some clear examples of evidence-based approaches. And we wanted to collate this into a resource that could be used to stimulate discussion and provoke, I suppose, discussion and ideas with academics and students. Our intention wasn't necessarily for academics to engage with the full review, the scoping review, although they were very welcome to, but we're very conscious of the ever expanding workload of academics, and we wanted to offer them some prompts or ideas rather than, you know, a kind of a detailed scoping review that would be very dense for them to engage with, because they're already engaging in their own research. But we knew we couldn't come up with the resource off the top of our head, even though a lot of what we were thinking was validated in the scoping review. But we knew in order to develop the resource and to workshop it with confidence, it would need to be underpinned with the literature review. So this is the resource that we developed. I know it's quite difficult to read there, but when I can you pop a link in, Rob, would you mind, into the chat box so they can access the resource? So this resource tries to, I suppose, distill a lot of the main findings, but more so, as I said, in terms of prompting ideas with academic staff. And we present this from kind of low-level partnership to high-level partnership. And the low-level partnership looks at some basic examples that might be suitable for academics engaging in assessment partnerships for the first time, or perhaps for students who are early in their kind of early stages of their academic studies. For example, in the summative space, students might be offered an opportunity to negotiate their assignment briefs or some choice on the assignment topic or format of delivery. And Rob might touch on that later on when he introduces some of the pilots. Formatively, at this kind of low-level partnership, they may be asked to engage in some self or peer assessment, and that's always good practice. As students and academics become more competent, we move across, I suppose, the continuum to high-level partnerships. For example, and some of you mentioned it already, co-designing or co-creating assessment and or rubrics. And summatively engaging in peer and self-assessment as opposed to, say, formatively at low level. On the flip side of this resource, you can see some of the main points collated from the work of the National Forum. So the advice to academics kind of is the National Forum's work. And then some of the work from NSTEP, the Student Engagement, National Student Engagement Project, is advice to students. And we brought this resource to a focus group of students in DCU before we launched it, and we asked them for some feedback. And their advice was really quite clear. They wanted more opportunities for two-way dialogue and discussion. They wanted the assessment to be fair both within their module and across modules. And they wanted greater agency because they made the point that they are the experts of their own learning, individual learning, not us as their academic. So all of these wants, all of these wants can be effectively addressed through assessment for and as learning, in addition to of learning. That is really assessment used wisely and in a considered and planned way. So kind of viewed as a valuable opportunity to advance the learning for students. And I'd like to take this point, if I may, to share a 1-minute clip with you from a student of ours, Niall Henry. And I really enjoy this kind of 1-minute clip because he demystifies, in my mind anyway, demystifies and simplifies the role of assessment by using a sporting analogy. So I'll just play that with you.
I want to compare then sort of assessment cycle to the cycle that you might use in a professional sports setting. That before a match, like you see there, there's all sort of processes that go into so that the team can perform to their best, that they know exactly what they're getting into and exactly how they're going to react to different situations that happen in a match. And I think that then they go and play their match, which is comparable to doing an assessment. But then after, what happens after is just as important as what happens before the assessment or the match. That if you don't recover properly from your match, you won't be able to train properly for your next match. And similarly, if you don't learn from your assessment, you won't be able to implement that in subsequent assessments as well.
And I really like the way Niall sees the value of assessment beyond the task and encourages all of us to see each assessment as a valuable learning opportunity for both the student and the academic. And in this way, we might better work as partners to design assessments that are integrated and scaffolded and offer real value to the students in terms of showcasing their learning and progressing their learning. So I'm going to pass you over now to Rob again, who'll walk you through some of the pilots and the research findings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. And I can see there's lots of activity in the chat box, which is great. So please do keep adding your questions and your comments, and we'll get to them. Thanks, Fiona, for giving that great overview. I should mention, I know you have some representatives from Ireland's National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning at this event, and Niall, the student, Fiona just showed that he's a student intern with the National Forum, and he's incredibly articulate and insightful. We could only show you a 1-minute clip, but I could listen to Niall all day talk about education and assessment. And also, it was I should apologize. It was remiss of me not to mention our good colleague Ruth Violon from Hibernia College, who assisted us with the literature review. You might have heard Fiona mentioning the 3 authors of the literature review, which was myself and Fiona, and of course our good colleague Ruth. So the work couldn't have been done without her. But as Fiona said, I'm going to move on now a bit and talk a bit about the practical aspect of the project, which was the pilots that we supported our students and our staff in engaging in last semester. So in semester 1 of 2021, so that was from maybe October to December of last year, we decided we wanted to pilot some of these partnership approaches that we distilled from our literature into the resource, and we wanted to help students and staff get up and running with student partnership and assessment. So we have a teaching and learning week annually in the university, which is sort of a celebration of teaching and learning and a great showcase and a great dissemination of good teaching practice. And Fiona and I held a kickoff workshop to sort of put our SaPiA work out into the ether and try and encourage some of our lecturers to try some partnership approaches. And it was a great workshop, and in that workshop, I think showing the resource to the lecturers really helped to demystify what student partnership was. It helped them to really understand that a lot of what we found in our work is actually stuff they're already doing. So things like giving students choice in assessment topics is probably something we all do and always have done in higher education. We mightn't have recognized it as partnership, but it is probably something that we are all doing. It's probably something you're all doing and have been doing for quite some time. So after our kickoff workshop, we managed to recruit about 8 lecturers across 11 modules to pilot some form of assessment partnership or some combination of different partnership approaches. The modules were mostly undergraduate and a mix of years from kind of 1st to 4th year. Myself and Fiona supported the staff as they needed, particularly say in relation to technology. This obviously happened during the COVID era when most of our students were learning online. So technology played a huge role in supporting the assessment partnerships, and myself and Fiona provided support with utilizing the technology, but also just in general kind of mapping out and supporting them along their assessment partnership journey. We also received ethical approval from the Research Ethics Committee in DCU to conduct an evaluation of the pilots, and we surveyed students and staff, and I'll share those results with you in a moment. So this is a brief summary of what the different modules utilize. So those are our subjects area there: computer science, economics, early childhood education, French, geography, human resource management, and politics. As you can see, a lot of people tended to stick with the low-level assessment partnership approaches, which is to be expected. You know, for some people, they may not have felt like they wanted to jump right in and do something quite complex and complicated with students. So a lot of them did things around giving students, again, they may have always given students choice in assessment topic, but a lot of them now started experimenting with giving students choice in assessment mode or assessment method. A lot of peer review, peer assessment took place, and this was new for some people, introducing peer assessment onto their modules. And then we did have some pilots where students were involved as co-creators, either co-creating quiz questions or being involved in co-creating a grading rubric. So as we can see from the continuum, we're sitting mainly in the low level area of the continuum down here, giving choice around topics and some peer assessment, which is good to see. So we're kind of moving up along the continuum to more medium level partnership when we start looking at things like peer assessment and self-assessment, and again, kind of co-designing and co-creating sits around the medium to high level as well. I'm now going to play a very brief clip, if you can bear with me, but this is from a seminar a few months ago where some of our lecturers who participated in the pilots are explaining a bit about what they did in more detail. So it's only a short clip. I think it's only 3 minutes. So I'm just going to play this and then we'll resume the presentation.
Well, they had the choice about whether they wanted to do this or do an essay, prefer to have self-selected groups, and they opted for the self-selected groups, and obviously they opted to do this as well. There were 5 analysis tools that were used. So each student in the group of 5 chose a different tool to look at, to observe the video. The choice of 6 videos that they could choose from to analyze, but everybody in each group, and there was 55 students of the 11 groups, each group chose 1 video. So every person in that group chose the 1 video. So the final bit was probably the most important, was the rubric. I designed it in such a way that it was similar to the rubric that we've always used. I did the draft, shared it with them, and let it sit with them for a while, and then they had an opportunity to inform it.
Students were allowed to choose their own groups and topics for the debates from a few broad themes that were taken from the current affairs. They were put into 2 small groups of 3 or 4 students, and while one group debated, the other group, or took part in the debate, the other group acted as the public and asked questions at the end, and then they exchanged roles. So students participated in 3 debates over the course of the semester, and they were given the choice to select one of the 3 for their final evaluation by the lecturer. That is, by peer evaluation was conducted with the same debate groups on a closed loop forum. As for the other activity components, there was the synchronous telecollaboration activity that was organized with students from a university in Paris. So there were online interactions between DCU students and students from a university in Paris. And the asynchronous individual activity comprised weekly oral and written comprehension tasks.
Each group would write 10 questions and provide an answer key for the questions, covering all the main themes that we studied throughout the semester. And then based on these questions, I would then do a final quiz that everybody in the module would take.
So this modified scenario here, so we're not all the same size and shape. So I could lie and tell you that I'm actually, 6'2", but nobody would believe me, right? So as well as kind of changing, giving them choice on topic, did this with 150 first semester students on a computer systems module, but it doesn't matter what the module is. I allowed the students to pick a topic. So I gave them, say, computer hardware, but within that they had kind of 4 or 5 different choices. And I said, if you want to do something different, just check with me that it's kind of on target. I also said to them, you can do it in any format you like. And they did.
So that just gives a brief example of what just some of our lecturers did. As you can see, they're mixing and matching different partnership approaches. The continuum that Fiona and I devised in that resource, it's not intended to be a sort of a strict, framework. It's really prompts and ideas for thinking. And I think all of our lecturers who were involved in the pilot mixed and matched different partnership approaches to come up with something that suited them and their context. And as Monica said in her clip, this isn't discipline specific either. It's not that one sort of partnership approach suits one sort of discipline. Student partnership is for everybody, and really you can take the principles, take the ideas, and make them your own. That's kind of really what we ended.
Well, they had the choice about whether they wanted.
Yeah, that's really what we kind of uncovered when we went to run our evaluation with staff and students. So we issued an anonymous survey to the students who were involved in the 8 modules, and we also issued an anonymous survey to the 8 lecturers who were involved in the pilot. So I'm just going to go through a snapshot of some of the findings now. I won't go through everything in detail. You have a link to the slides, so you can take a look at your own time. But I'm just going to highlight a couple of key things that we found. So again, initially we asked the students from their perspective, what did they perceive as the partnership approach that was utilized in their module. And again, we're seeing a lot of peer review, peer assessment, discussion of assessment, discussion of work, etc. We're seeing choice, discussing the assessment, working with review criteria and grading criteria, etc. to guide the development of one's assessment. That's how students perceived things. Again, as I said, and as we'll see, peer review, peer assessment, and what was one of the more dominant partnership approaches that was utilized in this pilot. We then asked students what were their kind of attitudes or feeling towards partnership, and largely positive, as you can see. I hope you can see this graph okay, but if not, you might take a look at the slides, but largely speaking, the bright blue and the orange here is a strongly agree or agree, and most of the students were positively disposed towards the partnership approaches that they experienced. Some were a bit ambivalent, being kind of neutral in their reaction, but we were quite heartened to find that there was only a small percentage of students who responded negatively towards their experience. So we were very, very happy with that. And just to focus in on 2 of these in particular, we found that 77% of the student respondents strongly agreed or agreed that they felt involved or engaged with the module because of the assessment partnership. And we found that was very important because, again, you know, this project that we incepted didn't arrive in a vacuum and is situated in various other contexts, including some work that the National Forum in Ireland, as I mentioned before, they've done some work around student success and how students can be successful at university. And one of the core things that can help students succeed at university is feeling a sense of belonging or a sense of involvement. So we were very, very happy to see that they did feel involved and did feel engaged because of this, because that can help them towards their own success. Similarly, again, 64% of them feel they performed well in the module. So they had additional learning gains, they had better performance in the module as a result of being involved due to the partnership approach. So that's also great as well. Students are learning more and performing better as a result of being a partner in their assessment. And you can see some of the comments from them. We were treated like adults. That's really, really nice to see because, you know, again, it is important that we recognize students as experts in their own learning, that we recognize students maybe not as co-equals, but they are fully fledged adults. They do and should be able to guide their own university experience. It's another nice quote that SaPiA is pulling away from sort of the traditional rote learning off by heart. It helps them get more involved and learn more. Broadens my comfort zone. That's really nice. I think students, particularly having come from a post-primary environment that supports rote learning and terminal examinations and box ticking and so on, that's what they're used to from most of their education journey, and this type of assessment partnership is broadening what they're used to. And again, they feel it's more interactive and they wanted to do better because they were involved. So good for motivation as well. We had some open-ended questions in our student survey, and these are kind of some of the main themes that arose. As you'll have seen from some of the clips from earlier, group work, even though it's not called out specifically as a form of student partnership, it is a common form of assessment that is utilised in higher education, and group work was present on a lot of the different pilots that we ran. And students were positively disposed to it. They enjoyed working together, they enjoyed meeting people and working with people. And I think especially given the pandemic and the fact that a lot of students were at home, having that opportunity to engage in group work, I think was good for them. They enjoyed that. They really enjoyed the peer review, peer feedback, peer assessment. They found that insightful, and they found that it helped them learn, which again, there's a wealth of literature out there on the benefits of peer review and peer assessment, and our students have confirmed that through this pilot as well. They noted a variety of different assessments were being used, and that the student partnership approaches were a kind of a diversion from what they've been used to when it comes to assessment, a change from the norm, and that helped them engage. And overall, you know, there were lots of comments that it was an enjoyable experience. Of course, there were also some comments on areas that partnership can be improved, which is great to hear. So students were saying in particular where group work is involved, there's a real need for very clear signposting around group formation and group operation and expectations and deadlines, and particularly when students are choosing their own groups, as they did in some of the pilots. It's very important to have kind of very clear structures in place. Similarly, assessment practicalities, where you were talking about things like deadlines and where they need to upload something or submit something or etc. It's very, very important to be incredibly clear and consistent with those. And it's very interesting from our lecturer point of view, a lot of them felt they were being very open about assessment because they were partnering, they were talking about assessment, they were involving students, etc. But always from the student point of view, they always pick up on tiny little things in the workflow that may disrupt how they engage in assessment. So even though lecturers may think they're being very, very clear about what's involved in an assessment and what the plan is and so on, you can never be too clear. So always important to be consistent. And then generally, of course, there were general COVID issues reported as well, stress due to the pandemic, workload due to the pandemic. We had a shortened academic calendar because of the pandemic, and that impacted some students. Had a bit of digital fatigue from working with technology so much. So some areas for improvement, which we will definitely take on board for our next iteration. Again, I won't delve into these statistics in detail. You can look at them yourself, but these are the results of the staff experiences. Again, largely positive. A lot of them strongly agreeing with some of these statements, such as SaPiA enabled better performance, SaPiA enabled peer-to-peer discussion, enabled student and lecturer discussion, enabled dialogue, etc. Some very positive remarks there or some very positive responses there from our staff that were involved. And again, just to pick out two highlights, so 87% of the staff felt that students performed better in the assessment. So then again, that kind of links back to the high figures we saw from the student survey, that performance was improved as a result of assessment partnership. Again, similarly, engagement, the staff felt students were more engaged, which is great. And additionally, the staff felt that working in partnership enabled a shared assessment literacy between staff and students, which again is hugely important. We know from the literature that students need to know how to do assessments and need to know what's involved in assessments in order to succeed. And SaPiA and partnership approaches in general are ways of establishing assessment literacy, and that kind of aligns to what we found in our literature review as well. So we were very happy to see what we had found in our literature review was also coming out in some of our survey results. Similarly, again, staff attitudes, particularly towards the future, a lot of them are planning to continue with student partnership in the future, which is great, had a positive impact. Some of them saying some felt uncomfortable, some didn't feel uncomfortable. Interestingly, some feel they were taking a risk with student partnership, and it can be risky from the lecturer point of view, where they're very used to being in that dynamic of they're in control and they set the rules of the game for the module. And I suspect that is perhaps why so many of them chose to go with low-level partnership approaches, because they were perhaps somewhat less risky or a bit more safe than taking some of the high-level approaches. But good to see that they're planning to continue, and maybe over time they'll get more comfortable with SaPiA and they'll start moving towards high-level partnership. I won't go into this. We could do a whole other session on the role of technology in supporting student partnership in assessment. But I will say, please do check out a recent session we did for the Irish Universities Association around the role that technology can play in student partnership. And if anyone would like to discuss technology with us, please do. So where does the future take us? Well, we're satisfied that the SaPiA pilot has been successful. We want to promote the initiative further, run some more of these pilots in the upcoming academic year. Very interested in disseminating our work further. As we said, you know, what we've discovered in our literature review and in our resources is not necessarily a strict framework for how SaPiA needs to be done, but it is prompts and suggestions, and we'd really love to get it out there into the world and see how people interpret it and how people make it their own and learn from it. And we're also interested in exploring new dimensions of SaPiA. So one thing we haven't looked at, for example, are things like cultural aspect and what do we do maybe where we have very diverse staff bodies and perhaps certain personalities and so on, that and how do you manage that effectively. So that's something we're interested in availing of, and we're also interested in expanding on our advice to staff.